Now I'm going to tell you about the third part of our vacation. It is a cruise, and it starts out in Bremerhaven, Germany, and then goes via Honfleur to the Scilly Isles, to Lorient, to Bilbao, to La Coruna, to Tangier, to Barcelona, and then ends up in Nice, in France. The ship is going to be the MS Athena, and the Athena is a ship that has 16,000 tons, so really it isn't that big. A crew of 230, passenger capacity of 550 passengers, but on this trip we only had 330. But it does have an interesting history. And one of the things that happened to this ship, or with this ship, was that back in 1956, it was sailing under the name Stockholm. It sank the Italian luxury liner Andrea Doria near Nantucket, and 51 people were killed in that incident. And in December 2008, it was attacked by 29 pirate boats in the Gulf of Aden. And it also, at one time, ran under the name Völkerfreundschaft, which was a East German ship at the time. Now, in Bremerhaven, where we left, we boarded, and the boarding procedure with this company, is the Phoenix Company, was incredibly smooth. It went so fast that before you could turn around, you were actually on the long passageway. You had left your passport, and you were on your way to get onto the ship. Now I have to show you our cabin. You can see it's a very comfortable cabin with 2 beds. We had a bathroom attached to it, and in the bathroom we found a toilet with a bidet, believe it or not, as well as a large sink and a full bath. And in the cabin there was a TV, and there were 3 closets, certainly enough for us. And actually the room had an additional bed that you could fold down, so you could actually bunk a third party in there. I wanted to show you the typical menu in the main dining room. Unfortunately, though, I did not take a picture of it. And here you have a look at the Lotus restaurant, where you can serve yourself, and a glimpse from one of the decks in the bow of the ship. There's a bar and a lounge. There's a card and game room, and then the theater, where we saw some excellent performers, and finally the room for movies and lectures. Our first stop is in Honfleur, but we don't get out. We stay on board. We get lazy because we've been there before on a previous trip. And from Honfleur, the following day, we go to the Scilly Isles. Sounds silly, doesn't it? But it's spelled S-C-I-L-L-Y. And the Scilly Isles is a group of islands, small islands, just off the southwestern coast of England. And it's English is spoken on the island, and of course it belongs to England. And we had different choices, and what we chose was the Tresco Abbey Gardens, because of the beautiful gardens we were told about. We got there by tender. In other words, you know, they have to unload you onto small boats and then take you to these areas where the ship could not land. But from there, it's a very, very good hike to the famous gardens, and you can see the people hoofing it. And so you see the buildings in the back, and then you know that you have to get up there somehow. First thing we do is we get greeted by our guide. In this case it was an Englishman who knows the garden inside and out, knows every plant in the garden, and he just took us on an extended walk throughout the compound. And I'll tell you, the plants are amazing. They're from every walk of life. They're from every country in the world, from Mexico, from South America, from Australia, you name it. And what I will do now is I will let you look at some of those pictures and play you some music in the meantime. to see more and more plants and flowers. And eucalyptus trees, they grow fast and they grow furiously. It takes a very short time and they're huge. And then there's an interesting little plaque. Maybe you can stop the presentation right now and look at it, and maybe you can read it. And we ended up our trip to the Scilly Isles by going to the local museum with an exhibit of the sailing ship figureheads from stranded ships over the years. Next we went to Lorient. Now Lorient is a town that we were not too impressed with. Everything seems to be fairly new. I think the town was pretty much destroyed during World War II. And the only noticeable thing in that town, besides being able to eat some very good crepes, and you can see us doing that and having a cup of coffee along with it. But the interesting thing about Lorient are the German U-boat bunkers. And I'm showing you some of the bunkers in individual slides. Our next stop is Bilbao. One of the things in Bilbao that is worth seeing is the Guggenheim Museum. This was built fairly recently. Jutta, being more interested in extreme modern art than I, decided that we were going to split up. She's going to do this alone, and I'm going to do something else in the meantime. So she went on the guided tour. The tour guide was a woman who knew her stuff very well, and Jutta liked her a lot. She spoke very well, and she was able to explain all of the modern art, which is not that easy to know. The whole complex looks rather messy from far away, but when you get to be very close, it becomes a very impressive structure. And nearby is an interesting bridge I'm showing you. And there was also a fascinating spider sculpture. I like those long legs, and the spider was huge, looking over a little fountain. And then, of course, the main attraction, one of them, is the flower dog. Now, the flower dog was originally put up when the museum was opened, and the people liked it so much that they insisted this dog had to stay. The dog was designed by Jeff Koons, and it's become a permanent fixture. I am sure that the town fathers aren't that happy with it, because of the fact that this requires a great deal of maintenance. You have to make sure the flowers are fresh and are constantly changed. Now, this modern architecture was designed by the Canadian-American architect Frank Gehry. Now, Frank Gehry is very well known here in the States, but also in Europe and in some other countries. But I imagine this building is crying out for expensive maintenance through its lifetime because of all these curves that must be subject to leaks and whatnot. I cannot imagine this to be a very practical building. The exhibits on the first floor was, number one, a permanent installation by Richard Serra, but there also were modern sculptures, and then there was a minimalist exhibit that Jutta was talking about, but quite frankly, if you haven't been there, I guess it's difficult to understand. I understand she was able to walk into this installation, for whatever that's worth. The second floor was closed for alterations, and the third floor contained Picassos and Matisse and Rothko and Paul Klee and many others, and it's something that I might have wanted to see as well, but it's okay. And later on, Jutta had a tour through the town, and the first impression she came away with was that people look very healthy and very slim. Now that's in contrast to us here. And the town is extremely clean, and then you can see there's a roundabout and a marketplace, and there are several churches, the usual background for a Spanish city. Many little side streets and boutiques. For myself, I had an independent visit in town. I saw imposing old buildings, and again, I too was amazed at the many narrow streets and at the cleanliness. And that took care of our trip in Bilbao. Now, the next thing was supposed to be Bordeaux, but the ship's crew announced that they were going to skip Bordeaux for some reason or other. Our next stop was La Coruna. La Coruna is at the very northwestern tip of Spain, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. We took a bus ride along the coast, and first of all, the harbor didn't seem to take an end. It just kept on going. But then the coastline was gorgeous. We could see the Atlantic Ocean all the time. We came through a little town called Crystal City, which is named that way because of the glass fronts of the villas that are reflecting the sun. And then we came to the Hercules Lighthouse. Now that's an interesting building because it's a fully functioning lighthouse to this day, but it was started in the 6th century under the Romans. And we saw a sculpture and a fountain. We drove around a large lake with vacation homes, exclusive ones, small villages, and great, fantastic view all along. We got off the bus and we walked around, got our feet wet, and collected shells. And then we saw charming little alleyways with shops in them, stopped at a restaurant for a snack of tapas. And then when we came back, we noticed an interesting thing. There was a knife sharpener who was sitting on a bike. He had put the bike against the front of the bike against the wall, raised the rear wheel, and was pedaling away. And what he was doing is he was turning a sharpening tool and sharpened knives for different companies. And then as soon as he finished, he packed up his bike and he went to the next location. We thought it was a wonderful idea. Well, that was the end of this particular excursion in La Coruna, and the next one is going to be in Tangier. Our next excursion is in Tangier. We have ahead of us a long drive to a town called Tetuan. It's almost an hour. And on the way, it started out fairly civilized, and we had large buildings and roundabouts, what we were used to. But the further we got into the open country, the more desolate and depressing it became. And then we arrived in Tetuan. So many buildings were started and never finished. Of course, churches and mosques galore. Now, a typical large restaurant, you can see here, but men only. Where are the women? Our Muslim guide, Muhammad, introduced himself. He needed 2 additional helpers for security. And once you see the layout of the Medina, which is the downtown, the old town, you realize why. Because these are all very narrow passageways, and you could very easily get lost. And if you do get lost, you'll never find your way out. It's like a maze. Many of these narrow streets in the old city. Vendors selling produce while swatting flies. And I'll tell you what, I'll turn on some more music while you have a chance to peruse some of these pictures. Of course, the king must have a palace for his rare appearances. And now you can see a store selling gold jewelry. And a story goes with that, because women are not allowed to own real property. So the only way they can put something aside is by buying jewelry. And during weddings, the wedding gift for the woman is usually gold in the form of jewelry, which she then can set aside so that she has something tangible to hold on to. You see the next thing is the peppermint tea is their favorite drink in this country. And you see a little restaurant where we are sitting, the blue restaurant. It really doesn't look like a restaurant, but this is where we were served some tea. And it's a taste you have to get used to. We're not all that much impressed. Then there was a drugstore, and here they tried to sell us potions, and these potions are designed for any imaginable ailment. And next you can see a vendor selling nothing but Kleenex from a wheelbarrow. Look for the wheelbarrow on the left side. It's hard to find, but I just wanted to have the picture in there because we were amazed at this little stand. Again, you see tiny little cubby holes where tailors and beauticians are plying their trades, and then another very long bus ride to get back to Tangier. Now, we saw the poverty and dirt everywhere. The fields are littered with garbage and plastic bags and empty cans. Many of the houses seem to be under permanent construction. The landscape is arid, starving donkeys, starving sheep, starving cows. But our guides stated that they know their country is poor, but they love it and would never leave it. But our overall impression was, okay, so it's a poor country, but could it not at least be a clean one? Next port of call is Barcelona. What a change. We're docking right downtown. We're coming off the ship onto the dock. Buses are lined up to take us on our various excursions. Jutta is briskly walking down the stairs. And here's the playground where we find kids rollerblading. And you see a bench that has the typical Gaudi trademark. Gaudi, I should say, not Gaudi. Well, maybe it's interchangeable. Then we are following the footsteps of Gaudi. Now, Antonio Gaudi was an avant-garde Art Nouveau architect, and he died in 1926. And many of the buildings in town are famous, and we are going to have a good look at them. His buildings are whimsical in design, and just look at the unusual balconies and the intricate designs on floor tiles and the ornate skylight. And then the other thing is the whole city is shockingly clean after what we've seen in Morocco, of course. It's especially noticeable. Notice the many trees and the flowers, even right smack downtown. And then motor scooters. Wherever you look, you find motor scooters skipping in and out of traffic, and you see ladies and young women and men. Everybody is riding them. And then you also see bikes for rent. Now, the bikes for rent is an interesting situation. There are about 100 drop-off points throughout the city, and it costs 30 euros a year to become a member. And with this membership, you get an access card, and you can go to any of those 100 drop-off points, pick up any bike, go for half an hour without paying anything, and then drop it off at another drop-off point. There are enough points in town so that you can really get around, and a half an hour is a lot of time. If you need more time, it costs you a few more pennies. It's really not expensive at all. And you find this kind of system throughout Europe in all the big cities, and I wonder why we don't do this in the States. In California, for instance, where the weather is nice, we should be able to do this. And the next thing we do is we go to the Güell Park. Now, at the Güell Park is where Gaudi lived at one time. And it was in a residential area pretty much run down. He bought the area, and then he developed this park. And this park is really something to see. And again, it's the same whimsical approach that he had with the houses as well. And you will see when I show you next a church he's building, or that was built under his design, or is being built under his design, I should say, again is representing this rather whimsical design. Now, when we get into the park, this is the main entrance, and you can see in the back is a huge building. It's a hall full of columns and benches with Gaudi mosaics. And we also see this iguana that was made and is one of the trademarks of that particular park. And when we are leaving the park, you can see that the area around it is still rather wild. Next, we're stopping at the cathedral. Now, I shouldn't call it a cathedral. It's an under construction cathedral, and it's been under construction for many, many years. It's called the Sagrada Familia. And they figure they might have it done by the year 2030, but it's very optimistic and it doesn't look like it's going to be finished by then. And in the cathedral, you can see it will end up with 18 towers. Only 6 of them are finished up to this point. And inside, it's an enormous construction site. Columns over columns, and you will find that the columns and some of the supports are like tree branches. But tree branches go in the other way, coming down rather than going up. And that's based on an interesting idea here. And you can see this, where he shows little bags full of sand suspended from strings. And then what he did is that he turned this photograph of that around 180 degrees to look at it, and thereby he could see how the final product would look and where the lines should go and where the supports should go. In order to be able to envision this, he did it in this rather unorthodox manner. So that was the idea of Barcelona, the Gaudis, and the park and the church. Let me give you a little more time to look at those pictures of the church. Now we are coming to Nice in France, and that's the end of the line. And we are no longer members of a group. We're now on our own. Our hotel is a disappointment, but it's downtown. First impression of Nice? Like Barcelona, clean as a whistle. Lots of motor scooters, and lots of tiny cars, and a very modern streetcar. We're walking along an elegant shopping street, and we found a great fountain. We saw nice apartment houses with balconies, and my oddity this time is a motorcycle with twin front wheels. Quite strange. I've never seen anything like it. And then there's this sign posted in the shopping area and stating that you could get locked up for up to 3 years and fined 300,000 euros, that's about $450,000, for buying or carrying counterfeit products. Now the trip is over and we can't wait to get home. Now look at this beautiful sunset and listen to the third part of that wonderful Telemann piece. Au revoir and hasta la vista.